Good day, everybody. This is Margie here, and welcome to Take Charge of Your Health Naturally podcast. I am very excited today. I have an extremely special guest with unique talents, and she works all over the world. But I would like to introduce her. Her name is Irina Castellano, but what she has as her background is incredible. She has a passion to learn how to heal from past experiences. And during that time, she has worked with children with anger, guilt, shame, loss, sadness, and a whole lot more, including domestic violence. She has fostered more than 80 children in the past 25 years. Together with her family, she wanted to learn more about neuroscience and the developmental trauma. Very, very important. She wanted to help these kids. So Alina is going to share with you today what she has learned over the years as a mother, an adoptive mother, a foster carer, an author, a life coach, a trainer, and an academic lecturer. I might add, just before I came on, she shared with me that she is a guest speaker and she's going all the way to Taiwan. No, sorry, not Taiwan, Vietnam. And she's lecturing on this very subject. So how lucky are we to have her with us today? Welcome, Alina.
Thank you very much for having me, Margie. Much appreciated.
So to give the audience a little background, tell me what brought you or your journey to get to this point of offering.
Yeah, more than happy to do so because it has really been a journey. So I'm actually an expat child. So I moved quite a bit with my family. Saw at a very young age that, maybe I did have a pretty privileged childhood and that there is poverty and hardships around me. But I always thought that, strangers do that hardship or natural disasters do that. But then at the age of 15, when I was living in America, I'm originally from Germany. And when my father, the engineer, was posted to America, I read a book and it was called A Child Called It. And it was a book that really stuck with me. I mean, I was 15. I had babysat since the age of 12. I loved children. And then I read that book and it made me really aware that even maybe biological families have such hardships where a mother would actually single out one of her children and abuse the child. And then this is the person who wrote the book, and he then ended up in foster care and later on became an inspirational speaker. So that story just so stuck with me, and I thought it was the first time I ever heard about fostering, and I thought, wow, one day I would love to not only have my own kids but actually also foster and maybe even adopt. And then I got into hospitality, into aviation, and it took me a while to find my husband. So I was mid-30s when I finally found my husband. And then I came over here to Australia and I was not allowed to work because of my spouse visa. And I just read whatever I could get my hands on. And there was a lot of local papers with ads in it about, hey, do you want to foster? Join our fostering agency. And I was like, that's what I always wanted to do. And I called my husband who was abroad and I said, listen, honey, how about, us fostering some kids? I always wanted to do that. And he was like, well, aren't we going to try for our own kids? And I said, yeah, but you also travel 200 days a year and I'm here, I've got nothing to do, I would love to spend my time helping kids. And so he came on that journey with me, and that was 25 years ago. And since then we've been fostering over 80 kids, and we've created a family with 3 kids. And 2 of them I adopted, one from Singapore, one locally from New South Wales. So I really would like for people to also know that the adoption laws, not in all states and territories, but in quite a few, have actually become more streamlined, and that it is possible to also adopt children from the out-of-home care system if they cannot be reunited with birth family, because that is always our preferred choice, of course. I mean, it's not our choice, it's the court, but it's also for, children should always remain with birth families if at all possible. So if they can be reunited, then that's a success story in the foster care system. And if it's not possible, then at least the kids should have permanency through guardianship or adoption. So that's how pretty much, it all started and how it got us here.
How amazing. You are so inspiring. So why would people or children or parents of children with issues, why should they come to you and how can you help them?
Yeah, well, I've realized now, these foster kids have taught me a lot and they're still teaching me on a daily basis. So whenever we have kids, they all are unique, they all are different, even though, of course, some things repeat itself. I think one of the key things when people ask me, well, out of all these kids, what is some behavior that you see in quite a few of them? And I would say, well, the majority are emotionally dysregulated and they need to learn how to regulate themselves. And I've become really, really keen on that subject because I think emotional regulation is something that we should be teaching more at schools. Because once kids are emotionally regulated, for me, that is actually, I would even say it's crime prevention, because once kids can actually regulate themselves, then, and they know that when they are feeling a certain way, they have strategies in place to regulate themselves, well, that can eliminate a lot of things in the future. Because first of all, it would make kids and adults less aggressive. It would also make them more aware of their inner feelings and how they can cope when they're feeling a bit down. And we all know that mental well-being is on the rise, suicide is on the rise. So if we would teach kids that at a very, very young age, we could make such a difference.
So if you don't mind me digressing just a little, with that in mind, do you see that there's an opportunity? Because my mission is about teaching and helping people take charge of their health naturally. This could avoid a lot of drugs that are given to children for depression and all sorts of things because they're not coping.
Yeah, I mean, you have Dr. Gabor Mate, who is a trauma expert, who feels very strongly about the fact that, for example, ADHD is trauma related. And we don't need to look very far. I mean, kids don't have to be in the out-of-home care system to be having trauma experiences, because at the end of the day, it could be anything. It could, because, I mean, trauma can already impact a child in utero. So if there's a very difficult pregnancy, so trauma is not just, what we think of having been abused or having been in a household with, maybe mental health issues or domestic violence. It doesn't even have to be that. It can be experiences like a really tough birth. It could be complications at birth that can already stress a baby at a very young age. So that can have an impact on the child's well-being after birth. Of course, we do know that, but how far does it influence a child in the future? And it can have a huge impact. So yes, I'm all for it that we don't just diagnose children, but that we actually look at the bigger picture. Where does it all come from? And Dr. Gabor Mate pretty much is, convinced that ADHD is trauma related. And he's written also a really good book, The Scattered Mind, on it. And he himself has ADHD. His children have ADHD. And yeah, it's just that the more we actually learn about it, that we understand, we need to know where it all comes from. So an unwanted behavior always has an unmet need. Unwanted
I love that.
behaviors have unmet
Unwanted
needs.
behavior
Mhm.
has an unmet need. So, do you make it your practice with these adopted families and children that you are taking through the system? Do you have the conversations, or is it counseling that helps them develop emotional maturity?
It would be a combination, I mean, a lot of these kids get help from the system and from the therapies that they can attend, but it's also the conversations we have that we remain curious. So, for example, that if something happens with the child is quite heated at that moment, we handle it with certain strategies, but that we also always keep a certain curiosity. So at the end of a few days later or the next day or even at the end of the day, that we say, I really wonder what brought on this tantrum, or why did you react? Can you maybe tell me a bit more about that? What made you really that angry? Or, that we also name the emotions, that a child understands that if it was taught that if somebody is angry, that you hit or lash out, or that you do things that are maybe hurtful for other people, that you say, well, this is now not how it works in this household. We don't do certain things. I'd rather have you go and, hit the pillow so that everybody stays safe, but that it's okay to be angry. How do you feel it when you're angry? Or it's your stomach tightening? Are your hands going into a fist? Okay, fine, so once you know how to recognize that you're feeling that way, then what can we do? But we want to make sure that you are safe and also people around you are safe. So what can you do? Yes, you can, go into the living room, you can scream all you want, that's fine, you can hit the pillow, and then when you're calm again, then let's get to it together, So I'm here, I can see you, I want you safe. So we don't send kids to their rooms because we want the rooms to remain safe places.
Right. I love that.
That we say, hey, it's okay to be mad, it's okay to be sad. You can use the emojis on the phones so that they can maybe say, hey, how did you feel earlier? Which one do you think matches you the most? And then if they point at one, say, okay, so that's the sad one. Yeah, it's okay to be sad. Sometimes I'm sad, but what do you do with it? And do you go and get some help? Do you want to maybe just have a cuddle? What is it that you need when you're sad? And that you start to have strategies in place. And of course, it doesn't work overnight, because if a child has always observed certain behaviors that weren't great role modeling, then we need to show them that there are other ways of doing it, but that we don't want children to hear, oh, you're a boy, don't cry, or just shut up, or whatever else. We don't want things like this with the children. We want them to be able to express their feelings, but we need to name it. We need to name what that feeling is, so that hopefully then shortly after, within a few weeks, few months, that a child learns that, hey, now I'm coming to you and I'm telling you I'm really angry. Okay, you're angry. What did we say you do when you're angry or frustrated or lonely or sad or whatever the emotion is, so that we actually really work with these emotions and give them strategies in place and acknowledge that we value them, that we show them that we hear them, we see them, and that we work with that. And then the workshops that are run, for example, they are based on the philosophy of Louise Hay, so that they're licensed workshop, and it's all about actually identifying the emotions, because I really don't believe so much in resharing the story, because it often re-triggers people, kids, adults. If they want to share, fine, but they don't need to share. The bigger picture is, how did that experience actually make you feel? So if that emotion is still with you, you have a lot of shame or guilt attached to something, then let's work with the emotion and have exercises where we let go of these emotions. So it's really more about working with the emotions rather than the experience itself.
I remember what you said about Louise Hay. She said, a thought is only a thought and it can be changed with the right support. So this is where you come in. Is that right?
Yeah, so the licensed workshop is based on her philosophy, but then I hope that I can also bring in it the experience that I've had with the kids in our care, so that we can combine it a bit more with the behaviors, because she was definitely ahead of her time. I mean, she's passed away already, and the work that she did, that she actually says that we need to have positive thoughts in our mind to actually heal. We cannot really function well when we constantly have negative thoughts. So if you have been told for the last 10 years that you're not worth anything and you will never amount to anything and you're just stupid, and you have that in your brain, and if you then learn about the neuroscience, where it says that you have a lot of, born with 1,000 trillion neurons at birth, but these neurons need to actually wire up. So they need to be stimulated. So children that are not stimulated, their brain remains very small, and the neurons, then if they're not used, they die off. So what we want is, of course, stimulation. We want interaction. So even if it's non-verbal at the very beginning, but child very quickly reads how you're feeling about it. So I always say a child, when it's born, it's actually pretty full of itself, because it's like, hey, I'm here, love me. And then what happens? So it's really the environment, the caregivers that really tell the child if it is valued or not. So the interaction that you get when a child that has been so wanted, for example, in a couple, and there's mom, dad fully involved, and maybe even grandparents. So there's consistent caregiving, there's constant, beautiful, nice interaction. That's a whole lot different than if it's a child that is another mouse to feed, or it's like, oh, just annoying, and it's irritating to have that kid around, and oh, I have to change another diaper. I mean, of course, that all tells the child how wanted it is every time it gets the interaction with the caregiver. And if then on top of everything you might have mental health issues, alcohol, drug abuse, then if you have that in the home environment and it's not consistent caregiving, and it's very 1 minute everything is hunky-dory and the next minute it's a really terrible abusive household, then that's very hard for these kids to understand because it's not consistent and they're confused, and the wiring is not the way it should be because you're not rewiring good and positive things but rather negative things, and our brain doesn't really know what's good and bad or real or fake. Our brain just knows what's actually repeated a lot. So if the negativity is repeated a lot, then that's what sticks in the brain and that's what keeps coming up again. So you have your thoughts, and if you believe that you're not worthy of love and you're stupid and you'll never amount to anything, and then you have your quiet moment and you get these thoughts, well, nothing good is going to come out of it. So if you then are in an environment where maybe now somebody tells you that, oh, that was really clever how you did that. Oh, how you did that puzzle. How smart was that? The brain goes, smart? Haven't used that a lot. And it's not like in the forefront, but you have to repeat it again and again and again so that the neurons that are now wiring are actually repeated, so they get myelinated. And when they are myelinated, they are really strong. And then the brain thinks, okay, that is used a lot, so I'm going to stick with that. And if you don't hear the negative things so much, then that will start to fall away. But it really depends how strongly wired the neurons are. So if you just here and there make one nice comment or something good for this kid, the brain kind of goes, that's not been used a lot. Okay, I can forget about that one. It goes on the wayside kind of thing. That's the way I like to explain it because it just makes so much sense. And
it makes a lot of sense, Irina. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you work with children, sometimes you see changes so quickly and sometimes you don't. You think, oh, am I making a difference? Is there hope? And there's always hope because the brain has neuroplasticity, so the brain can heal itself, but it's the support that you get. Some people have, of course, also a brain injury at 20, at 30, but it really depends on the support that person, of course, has around, and of course it depends on the damage itself. But it can take a long time for the brain to realize, like, oh, okay, yes, this is what I need to remember. But as I said, the brain doesn't know what's good or bad. It just knows what's actually been repeated a lot. And depending on how much of the negative stuff is there, it needs to kind of replace it. But yeah, it can take a while.
So tell me, do you have 2 tips for our listeners that from what you've said, and if they're in this situation, or even just a listener has experienced any of what you've said, what are 2 tips for them to take action?
Yeah, I think number 1 is actually to support yourself, to surround yourself with like-minded and supportive people, because what you really need is positive influence and somebody who actually has the patience and sticks with you, So we're not talking about mental illness as much as mental well-being. So for mental well-being, we really need to make sure that we have positivity in our lives, because really our personality reflects our reality then also. If you're doom and gloom, you will only attract doom and gloom. If you want to look at the law of attraction, you got to be positive and out there and leave the house and meet people in order to then meet people. So people are not going to come and knock on your door, which is easier said than done. But this is exactly where finding the right support is incredibly important. And that's why a lot of people sometimes don't even know what they need until they surround themselves with good support. And this is, where I'm hoping, for example, with my workshops, they're absolutely transformational and people get so much out of it. And I've had people who come because they need to heal, but also people who come and say, I don't know, I just have something missing. I don't feel I need to heal anything, but I just want to come and see what it's all about. And you get such clarity at the end of it, and you can see that, abundance is out there and support is out there, but we need to just look in the right place. So for me, yeah, you can heal yourself from the inside, but you need to also surround yourself with people who are on that same journey for accountability, for support, that you don't go it alone. Because, if we just let our brain take over, it doesn't often work, especially if it's pretty hardwired in a not so nice way.
So, Irina, you said to me that there's a workshop coming up soon. Would you like to share with the listeners? And the link will be underneath for anyone who wants to copy it.
Yeah, that would be brilliant. So my next workshop, because I'm always looking for a place where I can actually get 2 full days, because it's 2 very intense days, and it's from 9 o'clock in the morning until 5:30 at night. I provide the lunch. I want everybody to stay on premises because I really want people to mix, to actually get to know each other so that they feel really, really safe. And as mentioned before, for me, it's not about sharing the experiences. You don't need to share. It is about sharing what emotions you hold on to these experiences, and we let go of these emotions emotion. So my next workshop is on the 19th and 20th of July. I'm holding it in Des Moines. And yeah, if you would like to be a part of it, I would love for more people to come, because the more people that actually share on this journey, the more people can then reach out and help other people. So that's the whole purpose.
That's awesome. Now, a little birdie told me that you have a wonderful free gift for our listeners. Would you like to tell them a little about that?
Yeah, I was very lucky to actually co-author 3 books. And yes, the story here and there overlaps a bit, of course, but it's different books written for different purposes. So one of them is a bit of my life story in terms of my expat life and how I got into fostering and adoption, how I ended up here in Australia, how I met my husband, the whole thing, how we adopted the 2 kids. And then one book is more about how foster care works and the system itself. And the 3rd book was written together with families that actually have kids with disabilities, and they wanted to know what is different about maybe fostering children, what kind of behaviors they come with. So that's more from a trauma-informed base. So all 3 ebooks, ebook chapters, so it's just my chapters that I'm sharing, but all 3 chapters I'm happy to share with any of your listeners for free. So if they just contact me, and I'll send them through.
Oh, awesome. Irina, you've been so enlightening and very inspiring, and I want to thank you for taking the time out to not only share your experience, but to share your wonderful knowledge with everybody. I so appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Margie, for having me, and I'm so glad if I could help. And yeah, if people reach out, I'm more than happy to be there for them as well. So thank you very much for this platform.
Wonderful. Till next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.